If the update to the classes on Thursday wasn't enough, we've got some more, and I want to know which developer it is that really wants to play Affliction Warlock, because someone really wants them to come online in Phase 1, and I can't quite work out why. But anyway, what they've said is a reminder that these new changes are subject to change. The changes only affect PvE and have zero impact on arenas and battlegrounds, and the changes under each spec's name are only active for that spec, which is obviously very important. So if you see something that's a nerf to, let's say, Discipline, it won't affect Holy. If you see something that's a buff to Feral Tank, it's not going to affect Feral DPS. Now, there's quite a lot to get through, so we'll jump straight in, but just make sure you check out Rested XP in the pinned comment in the description, and of course, hit that subscribe button while you're there, because at 100k, we're giving away some heroic upgrade editions, and Blizzard are even chucking a couple in as well, so thanks for that. So firstly, Blood Death Knights of all classes have actually received a buff. This guy here will be very pleased. So Outbreak's base cooldown for Blood Death Knights has been decreased to 30 seconds where it was 60 seconds. So the developers have said this is absolutely nothing to do with actually buffing Blood Death Knights, because they understand at the start of the expansion they are pretty strong and it seems odd to give them a buff, but this is purely just to smooth out how it feels in dungeons when they're going between pools quite quick. And it's going to be particularly important in challenge modes. Now, I thought it was a bit of a weird one because you can remove the cooldown from Outbreak anyway, but it just comes at a runic power cost. But if you're choosing to not run that glyph, then cool, it's got a reduced cooldown. I don't claim to be any Blood Death Knight expert, so moving on. Frost DK's had a buff, so Howling Blast damage to targets around the primary target has now been increased to 65% of the damage dealt where it was 50%, so this is actually reverting a nerf that they saw in 5.2. Balanced Druid definitely needs some attention, but this is actually more of a fix than anything else. So Force of Nature for Balanced Druids has had its damage increased by 9.1% to match the Moonkin form adjustment last week. So in the buff on Thursday that they basically got their Nature and Arcane damage increased while in Moonkin form. Now Force of Nature is going to get the benefit. Now a much needed buff for Guardian Druids as well. Bear form for Guardian Druids now increases all damage you deal by 5%. Now, do note, if you had any plans or you're thinking, oh my god, this is great, this is going to bring Bear Weaving in and make it really, really strong, this is only affecting Guardian Druid. So as a Feral Cat, if you go in Bear form, you're not going to get that 5% damage. But still, I do think Guardian Druids are just one tank spec at the moment that are really flying under the radar, so to see them getting some love is really good. Survival Hunters had a slight nerf, but this is actually a nerf that they got in 5.4 that they've now changed back to have that nerf in place. Now, the reason there's no cause for concern here is because, yes, you're going to lose some damage on Explosive Shot, but currently Stampede isn't working properly. So once Stampede is actually working properly, Blizzard are kind of hoping that this is going to balance itself out. But obviously, we know Hunters are being stacked. They're far and away just the top DPS on most fights, so seeing a slight nerf should really come to no surprise. Mistweaver's revival healing has been decreased by 15%, so with the previous buff that it was given, it takes it to being a 22% increase to its original state, so it still had a buff, but just not quite as much as a buff as what it had on Thursday. And then Paladin, which is the one that I was really interested in seeing. If you watch my video I put on earlier this evening, well, it was actually much later yesterday now, because it's early hours of the morning for me now, I was talking about how strong Holy Paladin has been and how strong Retribution Paladin's been since the changes on Thursday. And I even specifically said that I could see the mana return actually being changed, and it turns out it was bugged. I didn't play Holy Paladin at all during the raid test in the weekend, but we could see very quickly that it was definitely returning far too much mana. So what it was actually doing was restoring total mana instead of base mana. So Seal of Insight now will correctly restore base mana for Holy Paladins, but the base mana it returns is increased to 6% where it was 4%. But what they've also done is Crusader Strike's cost for Holy Paladins has been decreased by 20%. So now bringing it down to 12% base mana, where it was 15%. And overall, they seem really happy with the changes that have happened to Holy Paladin, which is why they're making these changes to make the mana much better, but keep their output the same. Now, I want to put it out there. The output for Holy Paladin, if it's being played right, is absolutely mental at the moment. And having these nerfs to the mana was kind of needed, in my opinion. But I still do think this really puts Holy Paladin back on the menu. What with the change to Devotion Aura being 20% flat damage reduction rather than it just being magic damage reduction, and with all these adjustments to mana return when you're actually being able to get up to melee and having cheaper Crusader Strikes as well, Yeah, I think really, really looking good for Holy Pallies. Discipline Priest Divine Aegis healing conversion has been increased by 12.5% effectiveness, taking it to 90% where it was 80%. So they've done a partial revert from the nerf that they put in on Thursday, which in all fairness, our Discipline Priest, which is McNulty, I'll put a link to his YouTube channel down below if you want to go and check out any of his Discipline Priest content. The nerfs didn't seem to hit him too hard. His actual just healing profile seemed to change drastically from lots of atonement to lots of spirit shell. They're still playing around with Holy Priest as well, where they've nerfed the divine hymn healing by 35%. But what you got to remember, they did increase the amount of targets it hits to 50 in the latest changes. So even with the healing decrease, it's still going to be classed as a buff overall. It's just not going to be quite as strong as it was over the weekend. The good thing is though, Sanctuary, which is the AoE healing that's on the floor, has had its area of effect healing increased by 35%. Where it was 25%, and Serenity's increased a single target healing increase is now 35%, where it was 25%, and Chakra's cooldown has been decreased to 10 seconds, where it was 30 seconds. This one is absolutely huge. Like, seriously, that is massive, taking it from 30 seconds to 10 seconds. I do think with all these tweaks and they're trying to bring Holy Priest online, I think in terms of just raw HPS, I think Holy Priest is going to be really good. But again, it goes back to what I was saying in the latest video, that it's not all about HPS. It's about damage reduction cooldowns, the utility that you bring outside of I can do loads of healing. And then for Priest as well, Shadow has had a big buff to Shadow Word Pain, increasing its dot damage by 18%, which is a huge change. But from what I've seen from Shadow Priests, a much needed one as well. So that's really good. These hybrid classes like Ellie Shaman, Shadow Priest and Balanced Druid, I think they're three in particular that need a lot of love. And it's not because of the amount of damage they're doing, because Ellie Shaman's doing just fine. But on the basis they bring the 5% haste buff, it would be lovely to not need to take a hunter to bring that 5% haste buff just because the hunter does so much more damage, and actually give good reason to bring these hybrid casters to the raid, because some of them do actually bring really good utility as well. And like I said, I'm pretty sure one of these devs wants Affliction Warlock to be the best Warlock spec in Phase 1 for some reason, because they've reverted the 5.2 change, so Corruption's damage is now going to be increased by 33%. They reverted the 5.4 change, so Agony's damage is going to be increased by 18%, and they've reverted the 5.4 change, where Haunt's damage increase to your dots now is 40%, where it was 35%. I get it, Blizzard. You all play Affliction Warlocks, and you don't like Destruction. I'm being serious. The good thing is, out of all of the changes so far over the last week or so, no Destruction changes have actually happened, even though our lock was flip-flopping between Affliction and Destruction, and to be fair, his damage as Affliction on most bosses in Heart of Fear Heroic this weekend just gone was absolutely fine. And then Demonology. So Doom's damage over time has been increased by 33%, which is a 5.2 revert as well. And they're saying Demonology is very close to Destruction now near the start of the game, and this should give it an extra push in the situations where it needs a little more help. And then finally, Protection Warrior getting some love as well. So Shield Barrier's attack power modifier has been increased to 2, where it was 1.8. So this has been reverted from 5.2. Now, the reason this is important is because Shield Barrier's absorb that it puts on you scales, like you can see here, with attack power. So the more attack power you've got, the bigger the absorb that you're going to get on you. And even though Prop Warrior is doing absolutely fine, and any of you that played Prop Warrior over the weekend in Heart of Fear, it probably felt fantastic, it is really nice to see that they're looking at the underperforming tanks and giving them some tweaks. The one thing I'd like to see is just a little bit of attention thrown towards the Prop Paladin as well, because Holy Paladin and Rep Paladin, they've got a lot of love. Prop got a little bit in terms of damage reduction, but it would be nice to see him address the Prop Paladin's actual damage output before they start scaling really well with haste, and then the damage becomes amazing. But early on, it's not that impressive. But I'd really like to run a Prop Pally in Phase 1. Not me play it personally, but have a Prop Pally in our 10-man. So give them some damage, Blizz. And that's it. They're absolutely hammering it with these class changes, or tuning, whatever you want to call it. And I've been crying out for this since TBC. So I absolutely love to see the fact that they're doing it in my favourite expansion. You know, Mr. Pandaria, we're actually going to get really good class balance. And it looks like this is not where they're going to stop. We're going to see more changes in the lead up to it going live, and probably more balancing in a phase-by-phase basis. Or on a phase-by-phase basis. Sorry, it's really late. I'm struggling to talk. So what I'll do is I'll get a whiskey and I'll go. So be sure to like and subscribe. Let's get to 100k. If your class was affected in a positive way, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you on the next one.